Good evening. Hi, everyone. Thank you for making it here. What better thing to do on a Thursday evening than to discuss cricket with two incurable cricket romantics, as they've already been called, or cricket tragics, if you want to call them that, who've been watching cricket much longer than at least some of us in this room were born, right? And so we'll spend the next 30 to 45 minutes kind of hearing them recount some amazing experiences, anecdotes. Both of them are great recounters, so they'll have some very good stories to tell and will not mince any words with their opinions. And they do have between them some contrary opinions on some players, so it'll be fun to listen to that as well. Always a bit of needling is always fun, and that's what the moderator is there for, right? First up, welcome, special welcome to Raghu, who's managed to join us from Chennai. I'll kick off the discussion, Raghu, with you. Welcome. Tell us, the first question I want to ask both of you gentlemen is, what was the trigger behind writing this book? You've been watching and following cricket very passionately. You played it at a reasonably serious level for long as well. But what was the trigger for this book?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So Giri and I used to play some cricket when we were working in Madras in the same firm at Tiruvallur. And having discussed cricket for so long, we started writing a blog. The two of us got together. We had discussed so much that we thought, why don't we write something about so many interesting things, at least what we found very interesting. So we wrote a blog and we started with, I think, Cricinfo, and then we found a whole lot of our friends finding these very interesting. And slowly, we also got on to First Post, who put out these blogs very regularly. And quite a few of those friends then said, hey, why don't you put this all together and make it into a book? And it came from more than one friend. And therefore, that's how it started. And I mean, Giri is a more prolific writer. He writes on many things besides cricket. And I don't have enough in-depth knowledge on anything else except cricket. Over to you, Giri.
Giri, I heard you say that, two people writing a book is almost like living together, right? So tell us about this whole experience.
April 1984 was when I first met Raghunath. I was 27, he was 37. I went to Madras to join a firm where he was already the manufacturing manager of the product. And I joined as the marketing services person. We also played company cricket, but we realized that we love cricket. We love to play cricket. We love to watch cricket, and we love to read cricket, and we love to discuss cricket. And so the friendship flourished, but we not only loved to read cricket, we were reading a variety of things. So on one day, he would give me a Steinbeck. On another day, I would give him a Woodhouse. On a third day, we would both be sharing something else. So there was a lot of overlapping interests, and we enjoyed each other's company. And then I moved on. I went away to Delhi, and he continued in Chennai. And in such cases, when there is no mobile and even a phone at home was not there, friendships can wither away merely by distance. But it's the beauty of a friendship like this that we managed to remain in touch, visited each other over the years. And then in 2002, I moved to Bangalore to join the Azim Premji Foundation. And I started writing in 2002. I wrote my first piece for the press. I still remember the Hindustan Times in 1977 when I was a 19-year-old college student. And then I wrote a dozen more pieces, stupid stuff, for the next 3 years till 1980 or 1979. And that's it. I never wrote again. In 2002, I don't know what happened, but as my visits to remote and difficult schools, government schools in very difficult terrain, it moved me immensely, and I started writing from my experiences on the ground as I saw things. And that's when I resumed writing. And writing on such stuff to writing on cricket was a small step for me. And my initial couple of pieces were solo pieces. And but even then, I would talk to Raghu and ask him masala, and then build it together and write the pieces. 2007, quite by accident, I ran into Salim Durani at an airport lounge in the north. In fact, the first ever piece we wrote, which finds place in Mid-Wicket Tales, is the story on Salim Durani. The story on Salim Durani has a Raghunath connect again, because as I was talking to Durani about his exploits, Durani had lovely words to say about every cricketer he met. You name them and he will say something nice about them. And then as we were discussing, I realized that he was very confident and cheerful about his bowling, but there was a little bit of regret about his batting. And you could sense that he said, "Itna talent tha, but probably I didn't maximize my potential." You could sense it. But then I cheered him up by saying, "Boss, you're saying all this, but I know my friend Raghunath, he was fielding a deep cover in an innings where you went from 20 to 90 in 3 overs at the Khar Gymkhana ground. And as you were batting, word spread, Durani mood mein hai. And within minutes, thousands of spectators has got around Khar Gymkhana ground to watch Durani bat." Durani heard it and he didn't say, "Acha, that innings." He said, "Acha, your friend fielded a deep cover. Who is he? What is he?" So I told him, "Raghunath, he's a left-hander like you." "Acha, how is he? How does he bat?" And then I had to explain to him, because I had the fortune of having partnered Raghu in a few partnerships. Raghu would score 40, I would score 10 out of that partnership. That's beside the point. But I have had the fortune to bat with Raghu, and Raghu's timing is silken. With luck, Raghu should have played Ranji Trophy cricket, but he moved to Bombay and he played first division in Bombay. But Raghu, I've seen at the age of 37, batting with absolute silken touch. So I described Raghu to Durani for 20 minutes. That's Durani for you. One of the nicest and largest hearted cricketers. And the starting of the book was with Durani. And things could go on, but I'll stop here.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, the entire conversation is going to be about anecdotes like this. How many of you have read either this version or the previous version of the book? Okay. About half to more than half of the audience here has some familiarity with Mid-Wicket Tales. The updated version here contains 7 essays, correct, which are not in the original work, and each of those is fairly interesting and incisive. So, not all of it is necessarily a way of looking back at older data or older things with the new lens, but it's more about filling some gaps and then some interesting anecdotes and reminiscences. I'll begin with one of the most interesting ones here, which is called the 17th Man. Right? I'm a quiz master by profession. That's what I do for a living, apart from moderating these conversations with interesting people. So let me kick it off with a quiz question to all of you, and especially if you haven't read the updated version of the book, please answer. Who do you think this chapter is about? The 17th Man. It's not about anybody from the world of cricket, but it's about somebody from India that every single person in the country knows. And there's a lovely little story behind it. No? Someone hazard a guess for who's the most famous Indian whom you know? Mahatma Gandhi. I heard Mahatma Gandhi from Sachin sir and some people. So Mahatma Gandhi it is, and there's a very interesting story about why Mahatma Gandhi is called the 17th Man. I won't go into that. I'll let you guys read it and savor it. But Raghu, how do you come up with ideas like this to structure a chapter around, say, Gandhi in a book like Mid-Wicket Tales?
Well, this idea of writing a chapter on Gandhi was not mine. It's Giri's. So this particular question, if it's about how this chapter was written, I pass it back to Giri. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. A few words. I mean, since he's neatly tossed it back to you.
Sudharega nahi. Okay. See, Gandhiji born 1869. In 2019 was the 150th year, and Times of India wanted a piece on Gandhi, and they knew we had written cricket books, so they said Gandhi and cricket. So luckily for us, we didn't have to do too much research, honestly. There's enough on it. But the most interesting thing is the story, the 17th Man. And here I must also tip my hat to Narayan Krishnaswamy of Times of India, who actually helped us with the title. Some of these very nifty titles are not our titles. They are given by friends who are much better at it than us. So the story we wrote was that in 1930, when Douglas Jardine's team came to India, the English team came to India, Vijay Merchant's sister had an autograph book with all the 16 players of the English teams with their autographs. And it so happened that she went to Gandhiji and gave that book for an autograph. There were plenty of pages in that autograph book, and Gandhiji, with mischievous humor, instead of signing on a fresh page, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi or M.K. Gandhi, took that English team's 16 players and below that wrote number 17, M.K. Gandhi. Gandhiji has said that and Gandhiji's sense of humor has always been well known. And Gandhiji has said that if I didn't have a sense of humor, I would have gone mad. And he meant it with all seriousness. Our only regret, and we placed it there, is that Gandhi, as he grew up, kept a solid distance between himself and sports. And he also believed that we people should not be wasting time on sports. And that's something that we can all disagree with the great man. But the irony is that a man who said, I want to keep the maximum distance from sports, and I think it's a waste of time, and we have far better things to do in life, also had the humor to sign number 17 as Gandhiji. He did many other things too. For example, remember that awful tournament called the quadrangular and pentangular that used to be played in pre-independence India, where the English very mischievously made Indians play against each other as Hindus, Parsis, Muslims, and Mohammedans, and others. The cricket-loving public is actually torn. They want to see the game, and at the same time, they know this is not right. So you can imagine the dilemma for a cricket-loving Indian to go and watch a tournament where they are played this way. Gandhiji, in fact, requested the Hindus team to say, I do not agree with this. And that year, the Hindus did not play the tournament. The tournament crashed, and they had to rethink it significantly. But luckily, around 1934, the Ranji Trophy also started. Gandhiji had his other contributions also, and there's a lot, but we tried to encapsulate all this in one single chapter, because this book has about 27 chapters, I don't remember, of which one we thought we'll place is this chapter on Gandhi and cricket.
Yes, 34 chapters. Yeah, lovely. Absolutely lovely anecdote there. We spoke about Salim Durani, who obviously finds a chapter in this book, but I also want to speak about one more person who finds a chapter in this book, and it's probably appropriate we speak about him now because he left all of us a month and a half back, the great Bishan Singh Bedi. Raghu, your memories, you've seen him live, you've spoken to him, interacted with him, your memories of Bishan Singh Bedi and the impact he had in his playing years and later.
Well, one of Bedi's early tests that I saw was the checkbox match, West Indies versus India. And it was one of the first matches that Bedi played. And that was the match in which Chandra, Bedi and Prasanna were all three playing. And Bedi bowled quite brilliantly in that match. In fact, we would have won the match if a catch had been taken on the line where Hanuman Singh ran back and dropped the catch. That was off Sobers. Sobers and Griffith in that match defended for about 100 minutes, with Griffith playing every ball with his pad, knowing that he won't be given out at BW if he stretched forward. That was an amazing match in which Farooq Engineer scored almost a century before lunch. Well, coming back to Bedi, subsequently we saw Bedi, the bowler, and the first thing that captivated everyone was his action. He had such a beautiful action and a lovely pivot at the delivery stride. And I have to mention this. I read later, before he passed away, Jim Laker made a comment that heaven to me will be seeing Bedi bowl from one end and Ray Lindwall from the other end. Then I know it's heaven. And so Bedi's action was sublime. And later, he also, as captain of the Indian team, did a few wonderful things. And one of those was bravely declaring the Indian innings when 6 wickets were down, when West Indies were resorting to short pitch bowling, and he found that he did feel that his bowlers will get injured and would, if they were to add only a few runs and there was a great risk of them getting injured, he didn't want to take that risk. He declared that innings. And the final chapter of Bedi for me was this very, very clear comment when the Ferozshah Kotla ground was named after a politician. He said, I wish we stopped doing these things. Cricket grounds have to be named after cricketers, not administrators or politicians, especially politicians. And he withdrew his membership to the Delhi Cricket Association on this score just a few years before he died. Bedi was wonderfully frank and very, very straightforward, and there was no filter. He just said what was in his mind. And meeting him at Delhi and spending a couple of hours with him in the Delhi Golf Club was marvelous and one of the best evenings I've had. And I was very touched when we are now talking after the floods of a few days ago in Chennai, after the 2015 floods, Bedi called Giri and asked him, how are my friends in Chennai? How is Raghu? How is Venkataraghavan? And I was very, very thrilled that I was bracketed with a cricketer of that fame and repute in Bedi's mind. Yeah, that was Bedi for me.
Yeah. Giri, anything to add from your end?
No, he talked of Bedi's action. Actually, the spin quartet that we had, Chandra used to run a dozen paces and bowl with a quick arm. And he bowled much faster. The other three were the classical spinners, Venkat, Prasanna and Bedi. All three had divine actions. In fact, when we met Venkat for one of the chapters here, we spent about 4 hours at his home talking about everything about cricket. And Venkat had a ball because it was the memento that he had for the 100th test that had been played at Lord's, and he was the umpire there. So he took it very fondly, but immediately went into an off-spinner's action. Immediately. So I said off-spinner. So I took the ball and he looked at me like a hawk. I'm a leg spinner. Okay. So the ball, I think it sits slightly deeper in the hand than an off-spinner's ball. But I still know that it should not touch the palm. Venkat, should not touch the palm, should not touch the palm. At the age of 70, he's telling me when I'm holding the ball as a memento. That's the seriousness. And then immediately I said, Venkat, your action. And sitting in the chair, Venkat would do the divine sideways movement of his arm, the left arm going for the sky, and the pivot that he talks of will come automatically. All three spinners. In fact, Prasanna, after he finishes a delivery to a batsman and has beaten him, had the habit of walking backwards, saying, "Tere ko to phasaya maine. Ab tu jayega." So it was the backward walk that was the cockiness of Prasanna, which was telling the people. Venkat had, of course, the temperament of a fast bowler. Bedi would clap for a sixer after he's been hit for a six. But the batsman does not know that the next ball is going to be a super armor that's going to bowl him or get him LBW. So Bedi will clap for the six and get him out next ball. I must score a point over Raghu at this stage. Raghu, you watched the Bedi for the first time in 1967 in the Madras Test.
That's right.
1 week before that, or 2 weeks before that, I saw Bedi in Delhi playing for Board President's 11 against the same West Indies team. No patka and all that. Proper blue full turban in Delhi. And then I remember either it was Conrad Hunt or somebody who skied it to long off or long on. And Bedi, while taking the catch, I remember as a 10-year-old boy, I still remember Bedi had time to adjust his turban and take the catch. And I can never forget. When Gideon Haig, I think was a person who wrote a review of our book and wrote it very generously for us. And then I think he sent it to Bedi, or he asked us to send it to Bedi, and we did. Next day, Bedi called me up and said, "I'm Bishan Bedi." I said, "Yes." He said, "Wonderful, fantastic book, wonderful book." That's how he speaks, fast, wonderful book, fantastic, and all that. So I said, "You already read the book, Mr. Bedi?" He said, No, I read just a couple of chapters, but that's enough for me to phone you and tell you it's a fantastic book.
I have to add, Kiri, Bedi called me and said, this is the best cricket book written by Indians. I was, yeah.
Who are we to dispute it there? Absolutely. My the one of the really nice things about this book is that it combines some real nerdiness in terms of stats and analysis with some beautiful anecdotes and the kind of stories that you're listening to. So here is one good example of like a very stat based approach which throws up some very interesting results, right? So let me ask you one more question. Pre 2010, let's say, who do you think are your top 2, 3 best batsmen most impactful batsmen in ODI cricket? From let's say 1970 to 2010, if I asked you to give me a name, who would you say? Viv Richards, Dean Jones, okay. Sachin, all right. Miandad, Michael Bevan, very good. Matthew Hayden. Zair Abbas, you mean? Okay. Just ODIs. Okay. So, if you do a comparison between Mike Hussey, Michael Bevan, MS Dhoni, Viv Richards, Imran Khan, Dean Jones, Richard Hadley, Javad Miandad, Chris Keynes, Adam Gilchrist, Ian Botham, Virender Sehwag. These are 12 amazing names, right? Everybody will agree. Great batsmen, huge impact, change the game, etc. There is a 13th player above all of them who has the best strike rate, barring Sehwag, who has the best strike rate among all of these, and a very interesting stat called the rotating strike rate, in which he is leaps and bounds ahead of the others. Can you guess who that is? Kapil Dev, yeah. So Kapil Dev finished his ODI career at an incredible strike rate of 95.1. And if you take out the 4s and the 6ers that he hit and divide the rest of the runs he scored by the number of other balls faced, so what's called a rotating strike rate, which is that without the boundaries, if you just do the count, his rotating strike rate is 61.2. And Sehwag's rotating strike rate is 42.9. That's an amazing stat. I mean, it just, these gentlemen have pulled out and made this stat to just tell us that we all think of Kapil, as a big basher and, the 4 sixers he hit off Hemmings to avoid the follow on at Lords and all of that. But he was incredible at rotating strike and running between the wickets. Perspective on this, Raghu?
Yeah, this was, I've seen Kapil bat and I've seen him many times. And the first thing that struck me was his timing and his placement. He never ever hit the ball straight to the fielder. It was an innate kind of a genius. He would hit it between the fielders and, run 1 or 2. And very often, as we've said in that chapter, he made fairly lazy guys run very, very smartly with him. People like Venkataraghavan and Sandeep Patil, who would normally just run a single or hit a boundary, he made them run his runs, couples and threes for him. And the thing with Kapil was, this was one of the things which made us write this chapter. We were just talking, Giri and I said, look, I bet Kapil is one of those who would have played the fewest number of dot balls in one-day cricket. And then immediately Giri, went into his analytical mode, and with the help of whatever we could lay our hands on those years, he made this kind of a comparison and he said, Raghu, you're right. He's way above the rest. That's how it all. And then we wrote this chapter, and I'm sure most people would find this a very interesting nugget about Kapil Dev. And also the fact that he was a brilliant runner between the wickets and never got run out in ODI. He never got run out in Test cricket.
Never run out in Test cricket. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
The man who did. Okay, a bit of trouble for me. The trouble is that my boss, Dilip Ranjekar, is there. He's always been saying that at the foundation, I did more of this cricket massaging than actual work for the foundation. So you put me in a spot, and I can see he's very seriously looking at me from there.
Well, you have a book out in your name. I mean, there's no really hiding this.
So, okay. He used to say, never say, Giri, that you're working in Azim Premji Foundation. Say you're getting a salary from it. Can it be expunged and all that in this? Okay.
We'll edit the recording.
Please edit the recording. Okay. So I and Raghu have been fortunate to watch 2 or 3 of Kapil Dev's best knocks sitting together in Chennai. In Chennai, there is a D stand where it's bang opposite the pavilion where, quote unquote, the knowledgeable cricket playing
Chennai crowd sits there. Yeah.
cricket playing crowd or whatever sits there. And from behind the side screen there, we've seen 2 of Kapil's greatest centuries. And even at that time, Raghu's perception of Kapil never hitting straight to the field and running. If you look at many of Kapil's innings, he never starts off with bang, bang, bang. Before you know, he's on 20 of 17 balls or things like that. The analysis part of it was thanks to a very friendly stats guru on ESPN, a friendly Excel sheet and nothing more than that. And some Sunday and Saturday afternoons where I had nothing better to do than to massage data. But it was wonderful to realize that 4 out of 6 balls were balls where this man would take a run. There would be no dot balls. So Raghu's guess or instinct saying that this man played the fewest dot balls, all credit to Raghu for spotting it. I only did the grunt work.
Well done to the both of you, both for that instinct and for that analysis. From Kapil, let's fast forward a little bit to another player who's everybody's favorite, Dhoni. I'll read one interesting line from the Dhoni chapter, and I'd like you gentlemen to respond to that. And I think this is a constant source of discussion among Indian cricket fans and Dhoni fans. Everyone agrees that Dhoni was an outstanding ODI and T20 captain, but some accuse him of being less interested as a test captain. For us, that's an unfair summary. As the editor of Wisden India told us, one must view Dhoni's test captaincy in 2 phases, before 2011 and after 2011. Dhoni and his impact on Indian cricket, Raghu, and the 2 eras as you have mentioned in the book.
Well, I was one of those who didn't think too highly of Dhoni as a test captain to start with. And this was based on a test I was seeing in England in, I think it was at the Oval, when he had a leg spinner, not Piyush Chawla. Who's the other guy? Yes, Amit Mishra. And England was batting, and Dhoni got his fast bowlers to bowl first, and then just before lunch, brought in Suresh Raina to bowl his spinners, and finally brought on Amit Mishra only when England were 150 for 2. And I was screaming, saying, if you got a leg spinner in your side, and if you don't bring him on till everything else is exhausted, you're not a great captain. So I found a few things about Dhoni which irritated me. But overall, I think Dhoni has done so many wonderful things. One is the way he got the team together. The second is his total unflappable temperament. I think he was so calm that nobody ever felt, the pressure. And he was able to make people, play to their potential, to their highest potential. And that way he was a great captain. And later he did quite a few very intelligent things, both in Test cricket and in one days. And I will never forget how he promoted himself and came number 4 and won that World Cup for us, when things were looking a little dicey. And towards the end of his career, I thought he had become a great wicketkeeper, because the way he did his stumping was something amazing. He never took his hands back. He gathered the ball and took off the bails. He was very, very quick. And he was also a wonderful fellow who, got some runouts done by, pushing the ball onto the stumps straight from the fielder's throw. There were a few things like that which he did, which most other keepers haven't even attempted. So he was a very innovative wicketkeeper. And I think towards the last part of his career, he became a very canny and astute captain as well. And the way he got talent together and made it all happen was very, 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 very exciting and very, very insightful.
I think that point that the Wisden editor made is very, very important. Raghu is talking of a test match that was played in 2012 at the Oval, and Dhoni had an attack that had 2.5 members. It was also a team where Dravid, Lakshman, and Tendulkar were on their way down. And in a year or so, in fact, they were all out. So after 2011, he really had a weak team. And India had a very weak team. That's why from the position of number 1 on the ICC test ranking in 2010, when Dhoni was the captain, don't forget, we went down, slid down till 2014 before Kohli took over and a new team came with new members and went on. As regards Raghu fuming that he didn't bring the leg spinner on, I must tell you that Raghu likes leg spin. That is why I remember in a match that we played against Paris in Chennai, after the 2 fast bowlers had bowled 3 overs, he suddenly threw me the ball and I'm the leg spinner and said, Giri, bowl your leg spin. What's the field you want? The fact that I didn't bowl well is something else. But the fact that this man believed that a leg spinner can change the course of a game is very strong. I believe, honestly speaking, I think wrist spinners can create magic where finger spinners will find it difficult. One point to add to what Raghu said about Dhoni's captaincy is, I think Chahal and Kuldeep Yadav made the maximum strides in their bowling acumen and capabilities because of Dhoni behind the wicket, tutoring them ball to ball. I also think, I'm not saying too many games of late on the ground with Dhoni as captain, I must confess, but from what little I have seen, I think he had the angles of the fielders covered extremely well. So that shrewdness with his keeping, where he doesn't gather the ball and give but jams it to the wicket, that's one. The way he developed the spinners, and I think the angles around which he played, brilliant. So definitely Dhoni before 2011, different. Don't look at his career post 2011. It's the same way when you look at Kapil, the all-rounder, you should not look beyond 91. Post 91, what Kapil did is different from what Kapil did pre 91. And the figures and the assumptions, perceptions get a bit clouded. Dhoni was just simply terrific, is simply terrific.
And there's in the chapter in the book, there's the lovely little anecdote of how, Giri having rushed over at short notice to meet Dhoni, and showed him the book and showed him a lot of old photographs and so on. We're not growing in any particular chronology, but one of the things in the book that struck me was, and it seems to come across in multiple places, and this one chapter is both of your seeming love for left-handers and the elegance and the beauty that left-handers bring to the game. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, pretty much the only most of the chapters are general and are not dedicated to a particular player. There are a few like the one to Dhoni, for example. There's one to Bedi, but the only foreigner who pretty much finds foreign cricketer who finds an entire chapter dedicated to him is the wonderful Neil Harvey. We've heard a lot of people. I was born in the late 70s, so I grew up watching my cricket in the 80s and 90s, and even then I remember people waxing eloquent and reading the odd article about Neil Harvey and his impact and the beauty he brought to the game and so on. So perhaps for everyone here, Raghu, you can tell us a little bit about Neil Harvey and where he stands in the pantheon of cricketers, especially left-handers that you've seen bat.
I think you got me on to a subject where somewhere as we go along now, you got to signal me to stop. Because Neil Harvey is simply the greatest love I have for a cricketer. That's Neil Harvey. Harvey is the only one who's still alive from Don Bradman's 1948 team. Harvey is about 93 or 94, if I'm not mistaken. This happened because my love for Harvey, I'm not very sure whether I loved him because I started batting left-handed or whether I started batting left-handed because of Harvey. Harvey made his debut in 1947 against India. He scored 13 runs in his first test. That was the third test, Bradman's team against Lala Amarnath's team, which had gone to Australia. In the next test, he scored 153. Then they toured England. This was Don Bradman's last tour. And Bradman was in stupendous form and they had a fantastic team. Would you believe it? After scoring a century in the last test against India, Harvey didn't find a place in the 11 for the first three tests against England in that Ashes series. And in the fourth test, when he made his debut in England, Australia were in a bit of trouble and he came and scored an amazing century. He had a partnership with Keith Miller and then with Sam Loxton. Thereafter, in the next 5 or 6 years, Harvey was in amazing form. He was not only the best left-hander, he was probably the best batsman in the world after Bradman retired over the next 7 or 8 years. He scored about 10 centuries in his first 25 tests, which is as good as anybody can get. And he scored 8 of them against South Africa. The thing that attracted me to Harvey was his footwork. He was an absolutely nimble-footed player who ran down the pitch to spinners. I've said this in that chapter. Nobody played Subhash Gupte better. Subhash Gupte was nullified by Neil Harvey. And I must tell you, in 56 and 60, when Harvey came here, 56, he's the one who went out down the pitch and played Subhash Gupte with great confidence. The 3 W's, after playing Subhash Gupte in 1952, Weeks, Worrell and Walcott said, he is simply the greatest spinner we have faced. And they had faced everyone around the world by then. Harvey was also an absolutely brilliant fielder. And he was terrific looking. He was very handsome. And all these things put together made me a total Harvey fan. And I won't like to rate him because my opinion is extremely biased. But while we are on left-handers, there's one thing I would like to state. Most other countries have had many more left-handers than India. India has hardly had a good left-hand batsman in the top 5. We've had all-rounders who were left-handed. We've had Nadkarni, we've had Durani, we've had Rusi Surti. We've had so many of them, but they were bowlers who could also bat. That's how they came into Test cricket. The first serious left-handed batsman we had was Nari Contractor, who played for a length of time. After that, there was a brief incandescent moment for Vinod Kambli, but the first sustained left-hand batsman we had was Sourav Ganguly. So Ganguly, besides being a great captain, we talked about it already, is already also the greatest left-hander we've had as a batsman. And today, if you look at most of the other teams, they have 2 or 3 left-handers in the top 5, and we don't have any. Our first left-hander was earlier Rishabh Pant, now it is Jadeja. We don't have a left-hander, and that's a very, very serious problem we have. I must remind you that when we were 36 all out in Australia, all 11 batsmen were right-handers in that particular test. Riddhiman Saha was the wicketkeeper, not Rishabh Pant, and Jadeja was injured, he didn't play. So all 11 were right-handers, and all Australian pacers had to do was to bowl that same line through that innings. And we were all out LBW or caught at slips or behind.
Thank you for saying Sourav Ganguly. The Bengalis in the audience were getting really worked up till you finally mentioned his name and called him the greatest left-hander. Thank you. Were you a left-handed batsman?
Not even a right-hand batsman. Sorry. No.
That's a good one.
No. No, I would not give up my wicket easily.
Of course.
No way.
Put a price on your
Yeah, definitely.
Always.
Determination or talent mein thoda farak tha, but it's okay. Okay. We, in all these chapters, once again, 35 chapters, when we finish writing drafts, redraft, corrections, go to each other, correct it. There's only one chapter on which I could not change even a comma. Neil Harvey chapter, written from top to bottom by Sri Raghunath, and I had no right to even change a comma on it. By the way, I've spoken about Raghu's batting, etc. Last year, I saw Khwaja's batting at some length, and I studied it a bit closely for one reason. Somehow, and I've told it to Raghu also. I remember how Raghu used to bat. I was the non-striker in quite a few partnerships, as I've told you, and I've seen him bat there. And I told Raghu that, Raghu, I think you were batting the way Khwaja is batting now. So if you remember how Khwaja plays his drives to the offside and the onside, the grace is there, the effort is minimal, the ball skims along. Just imagine Khwaja playing now. That's how Raghu was batting in those days. Just to add that comparison on left-handers. By the way, while Raghu's point about India's 36 all-out is absolutely a brilliant point. And I still wonder why people still do not remember that had we had one left-hander to disrupt, it would have probably helped us not get all out for 36. Having said that, we now have Yashasvi Jaiswal, Tilak Verma, Washington Sundar, and Sai Sudarshan in a range of promising left-handers who I think 2 of the 4 could well become 2 of our top 6 batsmen in the next 5 years. In Test cricket. And
yeah, because you also have Rinku Singh for the T20. Yeah. Okay. A couple of more questions. Then I think the audience will definitely want to ask a bunch of questions as well. Touch upon a topic that has kind of found its way into this book. A topic of increasing discussion and a topic that is gladdening all our hearts, which is women's cricket and the strides that it has made over the years. And we now have veritable superstars of the game, recognizable stars. There were times when nobody could. Our favorite trick in quizzes earlier, about 5, 7, 10 years ago, would be to mask a particular question in cricket without giving the gender, and the answer would be a woman cricketer. Or even more straightforward, put up a woman cricketer's picture and very few people would recognize it. But these days, I think even kids can thankfully recognize Smriti and Harmanpreet. And we have a women's series going on right now as we speak. Giri, I'll start with you this time. Tell me about, in the days you used to play cricket, you played in Madras and then across the country. What was the women's cricket movement as you saw it? How was it game-wise, societally, and where did you see the change happen?
I don't know how cogently I will answer this because I'm thinking and talking about it. Today, all of us celebrate the women's team, rightfully so. Point number 1. Before I forget, the chapter on women's cricket in our book is contributed by one of India's finest sports writers, Karunya Keshav. For those of you who do not know, I think, India's best book on women's cricket, or one of the world's best books on women's cricket, is The Fire Burns Blue by Karunya Keshav and my good friend, late Siddhanta Patnaik. So as I speak to you, I'm a bit emotional because I remember the late Siddhanta Patnaik. Karunya Keshav very graciously agreed to write this chapter because you need to know the subject well to write. Had I and Raghu attempted this chapter, we would be fulfilling something and not from here. Karunya Keshav only deserved to write that, and I'm so glad she wrote. She's probably not here, but thanks to her. Also, we now remember Smriti Mandana and Harmanpreet Kaur and others, Shefali and others. We forget that the first seeds were sown 45 years ago. Nobody can forget the magnificent batting of Shanta Rangaswamy and the beautiful left-arm spin of Diana Edilji. So to answer your question, because we were cricket followers, we were obviously aware of India's valiant attempt at women's cricket. In those days, England and Australia simply thrashed any other team in cricket. But the Indian women would definitely give a good account of themselves, none more so than in batting a person like Shanta Rangaswamy and a person like Diana Edilji. In the 70s, a Ranji Trophy team would travel third class because we didn't have, what we did? We used to have first class train, second class and third class, and we quickly combined the two and made second class. But there was a third class bogie in our trains. Raghu is 77, I'm 67, so we'll take you back to those days when we had wooden planks on the trains. No cushions also in the second, third class, wooden planks with just the right kind of gap between two planks to make your butt very uncomfortable. You can't obviously sleep in the night there. There was something called a jamakalam, that striped thing which you put on that, that's no use. Anyway, so Ranji Trophy cricketers would travel in those things, those kind of compartments to go from Guntur or to Vijayawada to play a Ranji Trophy match. Nawab of Pataudi, Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudi, M.L. Jaisimha, Abbas Ali Beg, all very, very well-to-do cricketers would travel with the rest of the Hyderabad team in third class and play in Guntur and other places. No doubts about it. If they were doing that, imagine what Shanta Rangaswamy and Diana Edulji were undergoing. One is parents and community playing the game itself with some amount of skepticism and whether this is right. Biradari mein kya sochenge? You can't help that. And on top of it, to stay, they would stay in dormitories. They would stay in railway changing rooms. Even for women media, Sharda Ugra has written about it. So I think when we talk about women's cricket, I get very passionate about it. The kind of odds that these people have overcome to bring India to this level, words are not enough, number one. And number two, as we celebrate this team, we must spare a thought for the ladies who were the pioneers for India in those days.
Raghu, your views, your memories on this topic.
Yeah, Shanta Rangaswamy was my first big hero from women's cricket, and Diana Edulji. And Diana Edulji was a lovely left-arm spinner, and Shanta Rangaswamy was almost the entire batting centered around the girl from Bangalore. It was later that we produced all-rounders and other cricketers, and I think right now a lot of my very good friends who appreciate and understand cricket, including my son-in-law, they watch only women's cricket. My son-in-law watches only women's cricket, and he finds it very, very interesting and somehow feels that is a very genuine kind of a game which is at its nascent level still and developing very fast. And well, my earliest heroes in women's cricket were Shanta Rangaswamy and Diana Edulji. And later, of course, it was people like Harmanpreet and now the left-handed opener. What's her name? The opening batsman. Smriti. Is she a left-hand? I'm not too sure. Anyway, I think we have come a long way in women's cricket, and we are playing extremely good cricket with it's very professional. The running between the wickets, the fielding, everything has become so good. It's we used to have this very chauvinistic view early on about watching women's cricket, saying, "Hey, not bad. These women can play," kind of attitude. Right now, women's cricket, I think, is very, very good and very interesting to watch. And many teams are extremely competitive and highly talented. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. I mean, we are here in Bangalore, and how can we not talk about tech in anything, right? So one of the chapters in this book talks about analytics and how that's kind of made a significant change to the game. Raghu, you and Giri also posit in this chapter that perhaps the whole world of analytics, and you talk about how India and Indian captains slowly started embracing it during John Wright's time, and the story of Ramki S. Ramakrishnan, who's perhaps led India's finest firm in analytics based out of Chennai, and a mention of Prasanna as well, whom I was fortunate to know as well when he took up his first assignment in South Africa, and now runs a very successful YouTube channel and is a very successful video analyst. But you posit that this is perhaps more tuned to white ball cricket than red ball cricket. Do you see a generation of captains from here on relying more on data versus instinct, or is there always going to be that balance? And is it definitely going to be more for the shorter formats of the game rather than the traditional test cricket format?
That's a very tough question to answer. Certainly, a lot more analysis is now based on very, very good scientific data. And as you said, I've got one good friend, Ramki, here in Chennai, who does a lot of work with data and has made his firm is largely into sports analytics. And I think the way we are analyzing some of the things that happens, not only in the one day and shorter format, but even in test cricket, is extremely interesting now. And I think coaching of bowlers has also become pretty scientific now, and people are able to detect a lot of things from watching promising youngsters and correct a few faults which are creeping in by a whole lot of slow camera work, and they're able to play it back to them, and especially spinners and also the MRF based foundation has started using a whole lot of analytics and extremely good camera work. And I think this is going to be a feature of coaching hereafter. And we are going to be able to also spot talent and work on weaknesses of both batsmen and basic principles of bowling with a lot more of science which is getting into it and extremely astute camera work. Ramki, who we mentioned earlier, has done a lot of work and is an extremely interesting person to talk to. And he's got a firm in Indy where he employs about 20 people, and he's doing a lot of work on how to film cricket, how to analyze cricket, and how this can help in coaching youngsters. And he's got a lot of wonderful stories about who was a chucker and who was not, and a whole lot of things based on his experience with youngsters.
Okay, story. In 2001, India won one of their greatest test series against Australia. Remember Lakshman's 281? When that series was about to begin, Kumble was out of action because he had a rotator cuff tear and he had undergone surgery. India was looking for an off spinner. And Harbhajan had just made a brief foray and not considered. There was another person called Sarandeep Singh, I think. Ganguly said, John Wright, please watch Harbhajan. We should have him in the team. So John Wright said, let's watch him. And they found that Harbhajan had a good action in terms of getting the ball to turn and bounce. So that was what he was able to get. The analytics that was prevalent at that time was John Wright drew a box 10 inches by 15 inches or something like that at a spot outside the off stump, where if you pitch the off break, it will turn and hit the top of off stump. So this was what was called a pitch map. And then they found that Harbhajan bowling into that box drawn by John Wright consistently hit the top of the off stump. Story number 2. Venkatesh Prasad talking to us about how he would plot and plan a batsman's downfall. He said, all I had were 2-3 pieces of paper in my pocket. Before going to field, I will draw the fielding positions for batsman A on one paper, and on the back of the paper, plan B for the same batsman with fielding positions. So when he goes in for each batsman, he had a piece of paper in his pocket on which he had drawn all this. From there to where we are today is the leap. The inflection point, there are 2 inflection points. 2001, when Ramki was invited to talk about analytics to John Wright's team. John Wright was very careful. John Wright said, come and talk for 10 minutes. And I want you to talk first to people like Kumble and Dravid. And I want them to get a sense of it. And if they feel comfortable, we'll take it to the others. Luckily, it was a brilliant presentation. People like Kumble and Dravid responded. And that's where India's analytics use in cricket took root. And it went on. There's no doubt that the analytics produced by these Indian engineers and analysts is of a far greater quality. South Africa, Bangladesh, India, quite a few others use the Prasanna Agorams and others, as you mentioned. So this is how it happened. In 2010, anything too much of a good thing can be also too bad. From using analytics for the right level, England's coach after Andy Strauss's time went haywire and killed his players with analytics. So much so that there was a rebellion inside the English dressing room, and people like Peterson and all that would walk out of the dressing room the minute the coach will open his laptop. And he'll say, just as we say business is not done on Excel sheets, in the same way, he will say that this analytic sheet is not where I'm going to win my cricket match. So too much of a good thing, and they rebelled and England withdrew. The third inflection point is 2015 World Cup, because from then on, much of the analytics that we see are for consumers. For players, it is still a significant amount of video recording of my batting and bowling and where the ball is pitching and where it's hitting. A lot of the gizmoic stuff that you're seeing on TV is for consumers. They realize that if you want eyeballs on TV, my analytics has to be extremely sexy. And therefore, they jazzed it up and jazzed it up. If you ask a cricketer, I'm going over, but I think 75% of the analytics we see on TV are not something that the cricketers are going to watch for. Cricketers are going to watch video recordings of how they bat, where their feet are, where they're moving, how they're playing, are they moving back? And the bowler is going to see what I'm doing, etc. Armchair critics are a big problem for India. Armchair critics. Because without ever having caught a ball that comes to you, the ball makes a sound as it comes to you. It will come to you and it will sting your hand as you catch it. And we think that the fielder must take it 10 out of 10 times without even realizing that to get your hand in position in time to a ball that takes 0.3 seconds to you is a Herculean effort. The worst mistake we do is with Skyer. We think ball upar gaya to easy hai. The ball swings like anything. The good thing about analytics is, luckily they have shown many times, if the ball had not swung, it will come like this. Because the ball swung at the last time, the fielder had to make an adjustment and did it. I'm very happy that that piece of analytics is in front of us, because that is the only thing that tells armchair critics how difficult it is to play a fast ball, how difficult it is to catch a ball.
You should be kinder to armchair critics, Giri. What is this? Yeah, I mean, you can see sometimes,
I should be kinder to armchair critics. All I'm saying is be empathetic to the cricketers.
Yeah. Hey, you can see sometimes like the bowler and the keeper, like the bowler pointing to the dugout or wherever, because they have kind of planned out a dismissal and they've got it. Okay, pretty much my last question before I hand it over to questions from our audience. There's a beautiful epilogue in this book, like a lovely kind of encompassing summary, I would say, of what this book is all about and what the updated version is all about. And right at the end of that, the last few lines of this book is really what I want to ask you about. That, you have grown up watching cricket from the 1950s, the 1960s. You've seen the birth of white ball cricket and the multiple formats come in, the transformation that's happened in the game. But you continue to remain hard-nosed fans, very deep and passionate followers of the traditional red ball format. Raghu, I'll start with you. What is your sense today, given baseball, given the newfound aggression with the teams, given the World Test Championship and its and its incentives, the incentives that are created for wins and so on? Do you think the Test match cricket is in safe hands? It's a format that's going to continue to thrive and draw eyeballs and excite the kid who's playing somewhere in the Kemplast ground to don the whites and get on to Chepauk?
Very interesting question. And we have thought about this. There was a time when we thought Test cricket was bound to, become less and less popular because it was dull and it was slow. And one day cricket and this later T20 was getting so many more eyeballs, and most of the youngsters were excited to play and watch the faster cricket. But now I think a time has come when Test cricket has become extremely interesting. It's the number of overs bowled, which is 90 in a day. It used to be 60, 62 overs in most of the Test matches when I started watching cricket in the late 50s. And I think the dynamics of changes from the LBW to everything else that has happened has kept cricket very, very interesting. And I believe that Test cricket has now again become extremely popular because 90% of the matches have a decision. You don't have the dreary draws. I don't know, that we, at least some people in the crowd who would remember that we used to play series of matches against Pakistan when every test was drawn. In 1955, every test was drawn. Then again in 1960, when they came here to India, all the tests were drawn. And we would be only looking at individual performances of who scoring a century, etc., etc. It was deadly dull. And then when the 60 over cricket and the 50 over cricket came, then there was some kind of a awakening and a new form of cricket was being seen. But right now, I think Test cricket is gaining its primacy again because Test cricket has become much more attacking. And I think I would never have thought this possible. England are behind this new change in Test cricket. England used to be not so very attractive to watch. Australia and West Indies were the attractive sides to watch 20 years ago. And I think that has been a lovely change that has happened. And now we are seeing limited overs cricket having a lot of influence on Test cricket. It's become, the reverse is happening. Some of the skills that people are acquiring in limited overs cricket, the analysis, the strategy, and the skills, the reverse hit and the hoik batsman hitting the ball over the wicket keeper, everything has come into Test cricket. So Test cricket has become very interesting. And I think one can safely say that Test cricket is here to stay. And it's one of the most interesting things to watch because there is a result, and very often a result in 3.5, 4 days, not a dreary draw after 5 days. Yes, Giri, over to you.
You said that we still are die-hard. Okay. Actually, we would like to think we've also moved with the times. So, much of our playing was with the red ball, white clothes. Okay. But I think the kind of developments that he talked of that have come through white ball cricket and seeped into red ball cricket have been phenomenal. And to get stuck and say, oh, that is the only thing is not really good. I think we should have the ability to enjoy both. Therefore, if we were to see a World Test Championship, a World Cup One-Day Championship, or a World T20 Championship, the enthusiasm and interest with which we would see all three are the same, no difference. There's only one point of difference. And the point is that having this bilateral one-day series and bilateral T20 series, 3 matches between India and Bangladesh, 3 matches Australia versus West Indies, we should cut that out. It's too boring. Preserve the white ball cricket for these championships like World Cup and things like that. Use the time generated to create some more test series. So, for example, a 2-test series between India and South Africa does not do justice to these 2 test teams. A minimum of 4 tests would be lovely. So I think the calendar can be imaginatively handled so that we have all 3 formats in the right manner. There's one interesting thing. We talked of scramble seam. We talked of off-spinners bowling from round the wicket to right-handed batsmen. We think all these are, apart from the fact that Joe Root also scores his century with a reverse hit over third man. Unthinkable. You would think only a Rishabh Pant would do it. So all these are wonderful things. I think people are there to enjoy cricket. Only thing is, I hope the crowds come for Test cricket as much in India as they do for Test cricket in Australia or England or South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, good point. And at the risk of sounding a little whatever, I think that's also a function of where you put these test matches. And, the good grounds, the traditional grounds, like in Australia, are always going to draw crowds here as well. Anyway, without belaboring that point, let's turn it over to our audience. We have about, I think, 15 minutes. 15, 20 minutes, yeah. Titash.
Hi, Mr. Giridhar, and pleasure to listen to such beautiful stories of cricket. My question to you is, you mentioned about armchair critics, and nowadays, typically, armchair critics are very aggressive in terms of airing their views on social media. And often we see nowadays is that cricketers also respond to those criticisms. Like you have someone like Ravi Ashwin, who's very, very, active on Twitter and sometimes even responds to these criticisms. So in the earlier days, of course, you had newspaper reports where, again, there can be scathing criticism after a defeat. So what was your experience of these cricketers? How did they deal with those kind of criticism during that era? And how do you compare it to the reaction of the cricketers to the criticism these days?
Politely putting it, criticisms. What he means is the trolls of these days versus the critics of those days. And he's also spoken about a player who I know is very dear to both of your hearts, Ravichandran Ashwin. So we'll have Raghu, of course, who's the president of the World Ashwin Fan Federation. We'll have Raghu respond second on this.
Okay, let me take that. The passionate fans have always been there. Even in the days till 1971, 1968 is when we won our first overseas test match. Even though we had been playing cricket since 1932. But the passionate fan always believed India will win tomorrow. India will win tomorrow. India will win tomorrow. So the fan has always been passionate. The crowds have always packed the grounds. In fact, in the 60s and 70s, till the 60s, let us say, India would only play a test series in India once, go abroad 2 years later, another team will come. So all the cricket that we saw growing up was first-class cricket, packed grounds. So people really loved the game and came and championed it. Obviously, in those days, the relationship between the media and the players was also different. So, for example, the old-timers like K.N. Prabhu, or even a bit later generation like Rajan Bala or R. Mohan, they had very, very warm relations with players. They would criticize them, but they had a very healthy equation. It's not that the fans didn't react. In 1971, we won the test series against England and we won against West Indies. And they raised Wadekar to the skies and they had a cricket bat of cement made in Indore called Victory Bat and all that. We went in 1974 and we lost, and there's a separate story why we lost. You immediately go and deface the bat. Okay? Break it up. Okay. Come later. In 2003, we went to South Africa to play the World Cup. And you play a couple of matches badly and they start throwing stones at Dhoni's house and throwing stones at Ganguly's house, etc. So the trolling in those days was throwing stones or burning effigies. Today, the trolling is in social media. The pressure is much more because then all we had to do was for Sachin to come on media and say, look, fans, keep the faith. We will play well. Don't do all this. We are doing our best for the country, and people would listen to a man of Sachin's stature, and then the team went on to play well. So, totally different. Trolling now and the pressure on the players, impossible. Just imagine a 25-year-old cricketer, young person, living in a bubble, lots of money, lots of fame, cannot go and have pani puri at the place where he wants, and has to live in a bubble and cocoon. And suddenly at 30, he's dropped. His career is over. He has to do what he has to do for the next 30 years. I think the pressure on these young minds is incredible. I don't know what kind of well-being programs are being planned for them, but just imagine how many of us, our heartbeats are 120 when India is 5 for 3. And there is KL Rahul, age 31, knowing that he's being trolled, going there, stealing himself, and playing 96 and then getting praised to the skies. Neither he would be happy with that, nor would he want this. So just imagine the amount of pressure I think the New Zealand cricketers are in a very nice space. Small country, small crowd, small population, happiness-y happiness. And they do well.
I'm an old man. You got to phrase your question again. What was it you wanted?
The original question from Titash in the audience was that there's always been criticism against cricketers. In the olden days, it used to be media columns, and then it became, various other demonstrations and effigy burning and things like that. And today it's amplified on social media with trolls and, well-meaning people and trolls writing on social media, and some cricketers like he specifically named Ashwin responding to them on social media. So what's your experience been on how these cricketers would kind of take this criticism and how would they respond to it?
Well, I've got, I don't know if many of you have thought this way, but in the olden days when I started playing and watching cricket, it was a it was a game for amateurs. There was no place really for professionals. Vinu Mankad was the only professional in the 50s who played Lancashire League and didn't do any other job. He didn't have an employment. He was a cricketer and he played cricket. Things have changed tremendously. And in the olden days, a Pankaj Roy or a Vinu Mankad or Polly Umrigar or later even the Salim Duranis and Bapu Nadkarnis were not so professional all through their life. I mean, cricket was a pastime, a serious hobby. They also had to have a job to keep themselves going because nobody earned enough from cricket. Now, with the kind of money that cricketers are making, not only by playing cricket, but by being models and by being, stars in every possible way, I think cricketers will have to understand that they are celebrities and therefore they'll have to take some brickbats along with all the credit when they do well. So I don't think it is very unfair considering the kind of money they make if they sometimes get some unfair criticism as well. No, it's very natural. It's bound to happen. What was it? There was something else I wanted to say. I'm sorry, it slipped my mind.
Just want to say something.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just seeing a documentary called Beckham on what's on?
It's on Netflix.
Netflix. I'm on episode 3, I think. And you see the kind of suffering Beckham went through because he was sent out after fouling Simeone against Argentina. And the way the papers went for his blood, including some guy hanging an effigy outside their home, 2000 or 1990s or whatever. No social media then, but just the media going for them. I'm sure that Beckham, even today, has mental scars of what he went through as a 25-year-old, momentary lapse of judgment, and life's changed for him. So even if he's made all the money, he was the poster boy, posh pies, this, that, but what a price. That's no price for a young man to pay. In India, we are no better. Our media, once the TRP is the goal, they had a horrible program, a cringe-worthy title for a program called Match Ka Mujrim Kaun. Who is the criminal? Mujrim is, Hindi is, mujrim is criminal. In a sport that you're playing for your country or something like that, 11 out of 1 billion, 1.5, 134 crores or whatever. You drop a catch and that day the program is Match Ka Mujrim Kaun. I think that tells you everything about trolling. I think the trolling begins there. Whoever designed that program, don't come in front of me.
That is the person who's the answer to that question, Match Ka Mujrim Kaun. It's the producer of that show. Yeah.
Sorry, I remembered something which was said earlier, and I have to say my piece on Ravichandran Ashwin. Otherwise, I won't feel happy enough at the end of this program. I think he is one of the worst treated great cricketers that India has had. His selection is simply, I don't have a word for it. Ashwin has been one of our best bowlers across ages, especially in Test cricket. First, we said he's not good enough as a fielder, so we won't consider him for limited overs. Then we said he's a slow mover. So, very many such things were told about him. And then we said we'll play him only in India, and when we go out, we will not play him, we'll play Jadeja because Jadeja is the better batsman. And we played 4 fast bowlers. The 4th fast bowler in most of the matches was a passenger. It was a stupid decision, according to me. In Test cricket, when you take your 5 best batsmen, you must also pick your 3 best bowlers. And over the last decade, our 3 best bowlers have been Jasprit Bumrah, Mohammad Shami, and Ravichandran Ashwin. Period. So, to talk a lot of nonsense and drop him every so often and give stupid excuses for his omission is abominable.
Giri warned me about this.
Program Vasul.
Yeah, please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So my question is basically regarding the democratization of how the venues are allocated. So even after 75 years, if we see entire World Cup, the major matches are in the metro cities, be it Chepauk, Wankhede, Eden Garden, or Firozshah, and newly we can say the Motera Stadium or Narendra Modi Stadium. So how long will it take so that a tier 2 city, some of the stadiums in tier 2 city are at par with the major stadiums because they don't have, you can say the pillars which are in the old stadiums where your views are objected, be it Eden Gardens. So how long will it take? For example, 2026 World Cup, I saw Eden Garden is preparing for the final. Why should Eden Garden hold final? Why not a tier 2 city like Raipur, Ranchi, Vizag, or Vidarbha can hold major tournaments? And regarding the one more topic, there was a topic that a test cricket should be restricted to 5 venues, as Virat Kohli said. But why 5 venues? We are not a small nation like England or Australia, where cricketer is restricted to 3-4 places and the county structure is there and people will come and watch. In a country like India, where there are love for cricket, even in the villages and small places, and there are infrastructures, there are all the facilities. Why are we restricting it to the major cities only?
You want to take it on? Raghu, do you want to? Raghu, did you get that question?
Yeah, I got the question. I have a few comments on this. We have had test matches in some of these other venues, and we've seen that the crowds there have not been really able to appreciate some of the facets and features of test cricket. Right? I was of the opinion that test matches should be restricted to Chennai, Bangalore, Bombay, Calcutta, definitely. And maybe slowly, as people understood the longer version of the game, it should be perhaps played in other places as well. Because we find that a lot of people who come to test matches only want to see themselves on TV and are jumping up and down like monkeys. They don't understand the game at all, which was very sad. Even now, when we saw this last tournament which happened in India, it was quite sad to see a deafening silence when an Indian wicket fell or when one of our champions got out. Cricket wasn't being appreciated. It was very, very jingoistic. And our crowds are still, they're not really test match crowds. They are crowds mostly for the T20 game and sometimes perhaps for the 50-over game. Test matches, if they're played for a few more years in Calcutta, Bombay, Chennai and Bangalore, perhaps Delhi, that may be a good idea. That's what I feel about it. I don't know how the finer points of the game will be appreciated by a larger audience in some of the other places where we are playing matches. What do you think, Giri?
I think this needs deeper thinking and analysis, according to me. because sometimes when we do these kind of bad things, we may come to some wrong conclusions. I think two things. One, we must look at before 2010. We started making a lot of money. Indian cricket started making a lot of money, and they're plowing it back into strengthening the grassroots cricket, is what they say. So I think we should look at what have been the venues for Ranji Trophy games, Mushtaq Ali tournaments, Vijay Hazare tournaments across the country, which are first class cricket tournaments. So if you find that the first class tournaments are now being spread across a number of state capitals or even district headquarters, I think it's a move in the right direction. I don't agree that people in small towns will not appreciate cricket. I think good cricket lovers will be everywhere. It's just a question of perhaps they will sequentially develop more through one-day cricket onto test cricket, etc. So I think if we find that the first-class cricket is spreading deep across various pockets, we have made a first important step. The second step is the power of the pull. This is push, and the pull part of it is look at the way cricketers are now coming from various parts of India. It is no longer Bombay, Delhi, Madras, or Bangalore contributing India's cricketers. They're coming from various places and from very difficult backgrounds. An electrician's son, a miner's son, and so on and so forth, or a vendor's daughter, Radha Yadav, who is featured in our book. So democratization is happening because of the opportunities people are getting. So a number of tournaments are happening. A number of scouts are going across the country. A number of scouts are there. Therefore, one of the biggest things that's happening through IPL is out of these 250, 300 players that are playing IPL, you'll find at least 100 are absolutely gems being picked at speculation types. He's bowling very well in tennis ball cricket. Why don't we try him? And you will find, therefore, that a lot of such cricketers are coming from hinterland. The minute they come, their celebrities there. There'll be a pull for having cricket that features those people in those towns. Having said that, you must also accept that India is playing test cricket at Nagpur, Indore, Ranchi, Dharamsala. You're forgetting all those places. Lucknow, Vizag. So test cricket is also going to a number of places. In fact, holding a test match is probably easier because you don't need towers for lights for the night and all things like that. But most grounds now have it because India, the best thing for India is it's got a lot of money in cricket. It's a question of plowing it back into the game. I've given you a couple of jhalaks of how it's being done. It's a very inadequate answer because your question needs deep analysis and deep discussion.
Good evening, gentlemen. Fascinating session. Thank you. I just wanted to ask if there are any reflections in the book on India's pace bowling journey, and at what point would both of you think the change happened, the transformation into the formidable attack we are today?
I think, yeah, we did have Adatu Fatkar, Ramakant Desai. These were, the odd people who came through in spite of a lack of the right kind of coaching, fitness, etc., etc. And I think the turning point was Kapil Dev. With Kapil Dev, there were so many others who wanted to bowl like him, who wanted to play cricket like him. And I think after Kapil Dev, the real turning point was the MRF Pace Foundation. I think Dennis Lilly and the MRF Pace Foundation really made a difference in the way we spotted talent, nurtured it, coached it, and pushed it along with people like Shekhar and a few others who also worked very hard with Lilly to produce very promising fast bowlers. Having said that, I would still think that I think today's test cricket is a little too dependent on pace bowling. And I think if we do not do some correction here, we will lose the kind of edge we had because of a few generations of great spinners. I think we need to seriously, deeply think about it and do something to spot good talent, but ensure that dubious actions are not there, that the off spinners bowl with a clean action. And they already, I think, pace bowling has found its niche. There are going to be enough people who want to bowl like Bumrah, who want to bowl like Shami and others. And I think it's time we started thinking seriously about spin bowling.
Specifically, there's no question that the fast bowling quintet, I'll call it, in the last 5 or 7 years has been the greatest time for India's pace bowl. So much so that I think even in the World Cup you saw, India's 3 fast bowlers were a cut above even Cummins, Stark and Hazelwood till the final. Okay. But the fact is, and I think while the MRF Foundation brings it to a certain level, I think India's fast bowling coaches have been very good. B. Arun has been a great coach for India's fast bowling, and I think Paras Mambre is taking it on. The interesting thing is B. Arun played 2 tests for 1 wicket or so. Paras Mambre played 2 tests for no wickets or so. It doesn't matter. Acharekar never played Ranji, or did he play Ranji? And he coached Sachin. The fact is that a team that when you have bench strength, then that is when your fast bowling is good. If you have 3 fast bowlers, it's not a good attack. It is only when you have Ishant, Umesh, Bumrah, Shami, Siraj, and ready to take over a Prasidh and a couple of others, that's when you develop a strong thing. We'll have to see what happens when this current triumvirate eases off, but I'm sure by then you'll have more. In terms of spin, yes, Jadeja and Ashwin together form a combination comparatively with what Kumble and Harbhajan were, but I think even more effective. And if you leave Kumble and Harbhajan in the late 90s to early 2000s out, you'll have to go back to the 70s to the spin quartet. Because throughout 1980s and much of 90s, you had no spinner worth the salt, and you had just a couple of medium pacers and nobody else, a Manoj Prabhakar to accompany Kapil or somebody. In the early 2000s, we had a fantastic left-arm sequence. We had RP Singh, we had Ashish Nehra, we had Zahir, and we had Irfan. But unfortunately, none, along with others, you never could bring them together consistently over a period of 3 or 4 years to take wickets. This is clearly India's golden period for fast bowling.
I'll have the last word, and without having Raghu to refute me on that, I will say this transformation of India's fast bowling along with its fielding came because of one man, Virat Kohli. Yeah, we'll end on that note and hand it back to Advaita.
Thank you to S. Giridhar, BJ Raghunath, and Venkatesh Srinivasan for bringing their session to BIC today. And thank you to the audience for your interest and your questions. Just a small reminder, copies for purchase can be found outside. Thank you.
Also, one shout out for the podcast that these gentlemen do regularly. Please do tune in. It's a very fun, engaging, and interesting podcast. Quick word from you. Shout out for the podcast.
Okay, a 5-part series that we have done. We don't want to inflict on you because each one is 30-40 minutes. It's called Well Caught by Giri and Raghu. Well Caught by Giri and Raghu. And we did another very interesting podcast with a group called Bits and Pieces. They gave it a very naughty title. It's called Silly Mid-Wicket. And I think that's lousy advertising for the book. But thank you very much for being such a lovely audience. And it's a pleasure and privilege to be talking to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Raghu. Thank you so much for joining in.